Welcome back to the Left Library, the home of simplified political theory. Today we're covering Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality, the Politics of the News Media, a crucial critique of how mainstream media functions under capitalism. First published in 1986, Parenti's work is a deep dive into how news media serves the interests of the elites by constructing narratives that reflect the ideology of the ruling class. Parenti's central argument is that the news doesn't simply reflect reality, but plays a significant role in inventing reality, shaping public consciousness in a way that supports capitalism, imperialism, and the interests of the elite. His insights are still highly relevant in today's world of corporate media consolidation and media manipulation. In this video, we'll break down the key sections and ideas of inventing reality. Parenti begins by arguing that the media is not neutral or independent, but deeply tied to the interests of the capitalist class. According to Parenti, media corporations are part of the broader capitalist structure, and the owners of these corporations are part of the economic elite. Thus, their priorities reflect the interests of the ruling class. This leads to the media being a powerful tool of class power. The media, Parenti explains, plays a crucial role in maintaining capitalist hegemony by shaping public opinion in ways that benefit the elites. The ownership of most media outlets by a handful of wealthy corporations means that the content produced and distributed by these outlets reflects the interests of those corporations. News coverage tends to protect the capitalist system and downplay or ignore critiques of economic inequality, corporate power, or anti-imperialist perspectives. For example, Parenti discusses in this section how the media's coverage of economic issues, particularly in relation to taxes and government spending, tends to frame corporate tax cuts as necessary for economic growth, while portraying social spending as excessive or inefficient. This framing supports policies that benefit the wealthy while disadvantaging the working class. Open quote. The media do not simply report the news. They create the news in ways that serves the interests of the rich and powerful. End quote. This statement encapsulates Parenti's argument that the media is not a passive observer, but an active participant in maintaining the status quo. Parenti here also highlights how the media often portrays labour strikes or protests as disruptions, focusing on the inconvenience caused to the public rather than the underlying grievances of the workers. This serves to delegitimize labour movements and, in turn, protect corporate interests. Parenti argues that the media plays a critical role in manufacturing consent for the ruling class, a concept later expanded by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman in their book Manufacturing Consent. Parenti's analysis focuses on how the media shapes public opinion to align with elite interests, subtly guiding the audience to accept government policies, corporate actions, and foreign interventions as necessary and even justified. He details how the media accomplishes this by presenting a narrow range of acceptable viewpoints, effectively excluding or marginalizing dissenting voices. Parenti emphasizes that this marginalization of dissent is key to maintaining a system where capitalism is seen as the only viable economic structure, and critiques of capitalism are dismissed as fringe or extremist. For example, in this chapter, one of Parenti shows how anti-imperialist movements are reported in US media. He often shows how interventions in Latin America and other regions are often justified through a narrative of protecting democracy or fighting communism, while the actual economic and political interests of the US government are downplayed or ignored. Anti-imperialist resistance movements are often portrayed as violent or irrational, thereby marginalizing legitimate opposition to US foreign policy. To quote, "The media create a climate of opinion that makes it difficult for dissenting views to find a place in public discourse." End quote. Parenti notes that when dissenting voices do make it into the mainstream, they're often heavily scrutinized or ridiculed. the focus shifts from the substance of the critique to questioning the credibility or motives of the dissenters. This tactic ensures that the prevailing narrative remains unchallenged by the broader public. One of the central claims of mainstream journalism is that it adheres to strict standards of objectivity, so presenting facts without bias. Parenti systematically deconstructs this claim, arguing that objectivity in the media is a myth. He shows that what passes for objectivity often involves selectively framing stories, omitting crucial content, or giving disproportionate attention to elite voices or opinions on the matter. Parenti explains that objectivity in journalism is not about presenting all sides of an issue equally, but about reinforcing the dominant ideology. The choice of which stories to cover, how they are framed, and whose perspectives are highlighted all contribute to shaping the public's perception of reality in ways that favour the ruling class. Parenti illustrates this with the media's coverage of poverty and welfare programmes. Rather than exploring systemic causes of poverty, such as wage stagnation and rising inequality, the media often frames poverty as a result of individual failings. Similarly, coverage of welfare programs tends to focus on the so-called abuse of the system, reinforcing the idea that government assistance is a burden on society rather than a necessary safety net for millions. Open quote, "Objectivity itself is shaped by the political and economic forces that dominate the media, and is deployed selectively to reinforce the legitimacy of the capitalist system." End quote. Engaging with this myth, Parenti argues that objectivity is often a tool for legitimizing the perspectives of the powerful while casting suspicion on voices that challenge the status quo. For example, when corporations engage in environmental destruction, media coverage is likely to focus on the economic benefits or jobs created, rather than the lasting environmental damage caused. Parenti takes his critique further by discussing the role of ideology in the media. He argues that the news is not just a series of random reports, but a continuous construction of reality shaped by capitalist ideology. News stories often assume that capitalist solutions, such as privatization, deregulation, or tax cuts for the wealthy, are the only viable options, while alternatives like socialism or wealth redistribution are rarely considered. Parenti identifies how the framing of news stories often reinforces this capitalist ideology. For example, when discussing economic issues, the media frequently uses terms like job creators to describe the wealthy, reinforcing the idea that their interests align with the public good. Similarly, discussions of corporate profits and stock market performance are often framed as indicators of economic health, even when working class wages stagnate or even decline. In media coverage of international trade agreements like NAFTA, Parenti points out that the news largely ignored how these agreements benefit multinational corporations while harming workers in both the global north and the global south. By framing trade deals as beneficial to economic growth without addressing the human cost, the media perpetuates a narrative that aligns with corporate interests. Open quote. The media not only reports reality, but also works to construct a reality that aligns with capitalist interests. End quote. Parenti argues that the media is deeply involved in ideological gatekeeping, ensuring that the public remains focused on issues that align with capitalist values, such as economic growth defined by corporate profits, while neglecting issues like wealth inequality, labour rights, or environmental degradation. In conclusion, Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality remains a powerful critique of how the media serves the interest of capitalism and the ruling class. By shaping public consciousness, marginalizing dissent, and reinforcing dominant ideologies, the media helps sustain a system of economic inequality and imperial power. Parenti's analysis is more relevant than ever in today's era of corporate media consolidation and political polarization. In a world where the media plays a pivotal role in shaping public opinion, Parenti's work urges us to be critical consumers of news and recognise how media narratives are often crafted to serve the interests of the powerful. If you found this breakdown insightful, please don't forget to like, subscribe and stay tuned for more critical analysis of political theory texts here at the Left Library. Thank you.